Good evening. My name is Toby Tichton-Back, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Resource Center in Buffalo. This evening, our guest is Gregory Schershnevsky, and he was born in 1941 in Vilna, Lithuania. Gregory, will you tell us about your early life, the stories that you told me before?
Well, as you said, I was born in 1941 in April. Second World War II already continued for 2 years, but it was 2 months before Soviet Union entered war. War with Soviet Union began in June 21st of 41, and I was born in April, so I was 2 months old, and Vilna was occupied almost the same day. I think June 22nd, German army already entered Vilna, and actually first day they announced that all Jews had to move to so-called first ghetto, which occupied few blocks of downtown. At that time, my parents were not in Vilna because immediately as war began, they decided to move out of Vilna. They knew what they can expect. They tried to go ahead of German army to escape, but they were captured in White Russia and forced to go back to Vilna. When they came back to Vilna, first ghetto was already organized and all relatives of my father were already in ghetto. My parents knew that they wouldn't be able to survive outside of ghetto. They will be executed immediately. So they voluntarily went into first ghetto, which was eliminated, I think, in 2 months, in 2 weeks probably. And all Jews were moved to second ghetto, which was even smaller in size.
Do you know how large it was or how small it was, essentially? How many city blocks?
Maybe 2-3 city blocks.
For how many people?
I think that at highest point there were up to 100,000 Jews. Not just Vilna Jews, they brought Jews from all surrounding villages, small townships, and so on. In the beginning, everyone had work permit and was allowed to work or inside of ghetto or outside under German supervision or whatever. And in the beginning, my parents had working permit, but as soon German started execution or elimination of part of ghetto, they took away working permits. A number of jobs were eliminated. My parents lost their working permits, so they had to hide.
What kind of jobs, what kind of work did they do?
I don't know. They were working outside of ghettos, that's all I know. But I think that after 4 or 5 months, they already lost working permits, so they were hiding for 2 months. And actually, from day of creation of ghetto, first who were eliminated were small children. My father later on told that they call it action, children action. And during first children action, my parents had working permits, so they legally could keep me. During second actions, they somehow survived. I even don't know how. But when they got to know that there will be third children action, my parents knew that they won't be able to hide me anymore and save me anymore. Somehow they got in touch with Polish woman who lived in the city. She originally was from White Russia, moved to Vilna, I think 2 weeks before war. Her name was Alexandra Zhevetsky. I don't know how my mother got to know her, but there was agreement that she will hide me.
Did your parents have to pay for that?
No. I never asked my father, but knowing Alexandra Zhevetsky, I'm absolutely convinced that there wasn't any payment. In November of 41, my parents put me in garbage can, covered with some kind of garbage, and smuggled me out of ghetto to house of Alexander Zhevetsky and left me there. And after day, probably they were working. When they dropped me off, they continued to work wherever they work at that time, and they got back to ghetto. And I don't think that my mother ever saw me again.
Mm.
They stayed in ghetto. They both went underground in ghetto.
What does that mean to go underground?
It means that you don't have any papers. You cannot show on the street because there was even Jewish police. There were SS, German SS. You cannot work to provide food. So you simply cannot exist.
So how do people who were underground, how did they exist?
Only those people exist who were part of resistance. Because resistance had communication with outside world, outside of ghetto. They brought somehow food, or they made raids on very houses and brought food. Who wasn't part of underground resistance, they simply died. And because my parents took part in underground resistance, actually they were organizers, among organizers of Vilna ghetto resistance, they survived somehow. I was at that time, from November of 44, living with Alexander Zhevetsky.
No, it was in 1944.
I'm sorry, in 41.
41.
In 41, from November 41. When I was brought...
Excuse me, so you were an infant. You were just
yes,
a few
I was
months
7
old.
months old.
7
yes.
months old.
And I didn't look as Jewish child. So Alexander Zhevetsky took me to City Hall, or Burgomistrat at that time, and told them stories that she found me on her steps, and she wants to adopt me. And because I look like Polish boy, she said that she assumed that I'm Polish. She wants to give me Polish name, and she gave me name Stanislav Marian Kostko. I don't know why last name was Kostko, but it's up to her. And I stayed with her till liberation of Vilna. In 1943, I don't know, I think in middle of 1943, my father organized escape from Vilna ghetto. I think it was second escape. First was successful escape through sewer systems.
Through the sewers?
Yes, through the sewers. My father organized second escape, but they were betrayed. Somehow Germans found out about that escape, and originally ghetto, only resistant fighters left ghetto. There were maybe 30, 40 of them. They were armed. But when they were passing through a small village where a big group of Jews from ghetto was already working, people in that group understood that there is escape, and they joined that resistance group. They got to some small river or creek which they had to cross. They waited till late at night. They didn't know about ambush. And when they began to cross or just approach that river, machine guns from all over. Following day, my father found only 7 of
Only
them.
7 survived?
Yes.
Was
He
your
said
mother
that,
among that group?
no, he
No.
didn't find my father. My mother wasn't among survivors. No one really knows what happened. Later on, we were told that some people in ghetto following day saw big trucks passing by, and someone recognized my mother in that truck. So we assumed that she was executed in place where all Jews from Vilna ghetto were executed. And immediately after liberation of city, my father tried to find some records. He couldn't find, but definitely she was executed at that place.
The Germans didn't have any records of those executions?
They had for some, but my father didn't find any records of my father. But it was only one place where they executed, and especially after escape. So during that ambush, more than 140 people were killed on spot.
Including your mother?
Including my mother, or she was captured and executed in place which calls Panari.
Ponar Forest Massacre.
Yes, yes, yes. This is a place. At that time, I stayed with Pani Alexander Zhevetsky when I was brought to her, I was 7 months old, so I didn't speak yet. And when I began to speak, whenever it was, I spoke only Polish language because she taught me only Polish. She didn't speak Russian. She didn't speak Yiddish, of course. So I grew up actually in totally Polish environment, talking only Polish and recognizing only one name, not Gregory, given me by my parents, but Stanislavas, or Stasik, she called me. And I never called her by name until I grew up.
Did you call her mother in Polish?
Actually, yes, mother. In Polish language, mateńka is very soft mother. Till I grew up and understood meaning of word, I thought that it was her name.
Oh.
I grew up with that word mateńka, but it was mother. In 1944, as soon as the city was liberated, my father, knowing where I am, picked me up from her, and since then I stayed with my father.
Wait, excuse me. Let's go back a little bit before your father picks you up. What do you remember about your early, 4 years with this woman?
Not too much. I remember, and as I told you, I thought that it was a dream from childhood, but later on, when I met Alexandra Żywiecki in Poland, she told me that it looked like it was true. I remember that apartment in basement, because she was too poor to rent real apartment. So she stayed in basement apartment, very big space divided into big kitchen with wooden stove in one corner and big bedroom or only room or only room in her apartment filled with beds.
Well, did she have other children?
Yes, there were a lot of beds. I can't recall right now how many beds there were, but I think at highest point she had something like 14 children. None of them of her own. All of them were like myself, brought by parents, or she knew that their parents were executed, so she adopted. She didn't care of religion. She didn't care of nationalities. There were Polish children, Jewish, white Russians. They just cared of children.
She was a very good woman.
Absolutely. She was really sane woman in sense.
What did she do for food to feed you all during these hard years?
As far I know, and I don't remember already who told me so, in the same apartment house or part of apartment house in our courtyard was occupied by German hospital. And she worked as nurse during the day in hospital, so she was making her living and feeding all those kids from whatever income she had in hospital. Probably had chance to bring some extra food. Or
she needed
whatever.
Clothing for you too.
Yes, of course. And as far I know, I wasn't only one Jewish child in her family, big family. Later on, when I met her, she gave me article from paper. Article was written immediately after liberation of city in 44. And that article describes fate of another girl. I'm positive that I met her being child, but I don't remember her, of course. Her fate was even worse than mine, because my parents brought me or smuggled me out of ghetto when they knew about upcoming children action. In the beginning of ghetto existence, that girl was born in ghetto, and her parents gave her name Gitella, from ghetto, Gitella Gittelman. Her parents and entire family had to hide between two false walls during any search when Germans were looking for Jews for next executions. They were hiding, and that baby was crying. So in the beginning, when it was short search, maybe a few minutes or few hours, her grandfather covered her mouth with his mouth and gave her to breathe through his mouth. But later on, from starvation and illnesses, that baby was crying constantly. So during another search, they kept her under anesthesia. She was for almost for a week.
Anesthetized for almost
Yes,
a week?
yes, almost a week. So actually, she was dying already. Somehow, her parents got to know about Alexander Zhevetsky, and through their friend who lived in the city, they passed her to Alexander Zhevetsky. But Gitela was typical Jewish girl.
Dark, I presume.
Dark, Jewish nose, typical. So Alexandra could not bring her to City Hall to register. So together with her friend, they made doll in size of baby, brought the doll to Burgomistrat, City Hall, and told them that they found baby, and it looks like the baby has some kind of illness which can be transmitted. So no one wanted even to open that package.
Oh, so that was secured that way.
In such a way, she got birth certificate and registered Gitela. After obtaining birth certificate, she was be able to place her into the hospital, typical Jewish girl, knowing that if someone will discover, both of them will be executed immediately. She placed her into the hospital and saved her life.
This woman thought of everything, very courageous.
Yes, yes,
very
dedicated woman. So this I know about another event, and later on, I don't remember, somewhere in middle of 70s, there was research in archives about all Christian people involved in Vilna in savings of life of Jewish, not just children, those Jewish people. There were found, what do you call it, affidavits or from people who live now, or at that time lived in Israel, who stated that she saved life of their children. I even didn't know about their children. Maybe they stayed for a short period of time. Somehow they were not mentioned in an article I obtained from Alexander Zhevetsky when I met her in '67.
Maybe we should have some things projected on the screen, and then you can tell us about those things. The first thing we have is a picture. Tell us about that picture, please.
This is a picture of my uncle, my mother in the middle. Uncle is on the right side. Picture was taken probably a few years before war. They were born in Kolki village in Ukraine, at western Ukraine, which used to belong to Poland, and after 1940 became part of Soviet Union. It was a very big Ukrainian village, about 6,000 total population. 2,000 of them were Jews and 4,000 Ukrainians. All of Jews were executed in that village. At that time, as far as I know, my uncle took part in underground activities against Polish government or whatever. My mother was going in Vilna to medical nursing school. I think she was going to nursing school. And at that time, that picture was taken. Who is gentleman on the left, I don't know.
So this is before she meets your father?
I think so. I think it's before.
And this is the only picture you have of your mother?
Yes.
It seems like there's a similarity in the eyes there.
Maybe.
Yes. And the next item on the screen is a birth certificate.
Yes,
Tell us about that?
This is birth certificate Pani Alexandra Zhevetsky obtained to register me as a Polish boy. And you can see it's in Lithuanian language, and I don't recall already Lithuanian language, but it says that parents are unknown, because she told that she found me on the street, and she registered me under the name Stanislavas Marianas Kostko, Stanislav Marian Kostko. On opposite side of that birth certificate, there is date that I was registered in November 18th of 41. It seems to me that this is a duplicate of original birth certificate, because all dates are here from 43. So maybe she lost original and asked for duplicate.
Do you know why she called you Stanislavski?
I don't know why. I think that because Stanislavos is
A
holy
saint?
saint in Christian religion.
Or you said she was a very religious woman.
Very religion. I think that everything what he has done for all children, not just Jewish children, was moved by her deep religious beliefs.
She was a true Christian. And we have now the picture from the newspaper.
This picture, you can see Pani Alexandra Jevetsky in glasses
That's the
above.
woman who saved you.
Yes, this is a woman who saved my life. And below her, that white boy, blonde boy, it's myself.
You look very non-Jewish.
Yes, as far I understand, this picture was taken in 1944 by a Russian military correspondent who wrote article about that lady. And she actually was discovered because she saved the life of a Russian major who
That's
was...
an interesting story. Why don't you tell us that story?
In 1944, as far as I understand, she was probably 61, I think 61 years old. And during fighting for liberation of Vilna, she saw some person falling down in our courtyard. She didn't recognize uniform. She didn't know it was German soldier or Russian soldier. And as far as I understand, she didn't care. She saw person needed help. And being old person, she left under bombing, machine guns. She left her basement, went to the courtyard, and brought that wounded person into our basement.
Do you remember that? You were so little, but do you have an image?
Like in shadow, yes. And she actually saved his life, and it happened to be major of Soviet army. And when city was liberated, probably some medical people, or she reported, or they found that major in her apartment. And this is the way I think her story became known to Russian authorities, and military correspondent visited us. I don't remember, of course, but later on there was article published in a military newspaper, and for the rest of her life, she kept copy of that article cut out of paper. So I think that this picture was taken for that article in 44.
And how did you get the article?
Immediately after war, my uncle, who was in the picture with my mother, was sent to Poland to organize a new government. The reason he was sent, because before war he was citizen of Poland and he knew Polish environment. And he still lives in Poland. And in 1967, finally I had chance first time to visit him in Poland. I knew that Pani Alexandra Jevetsky left Soviet Union in 1957.
How did you know? Were you in correspondence?
We were in correspondence, but I saw her not very often. After I was taken to my parents, I visited her at least once per year for Christmas celebration, to celebrate her holiday. So I knew where she was, and I knew how many children she had. At that time, none of children she kept during the war were with her. But immediately after war, she found baby on her steps. It was already first time a real life story. She really found baby on her steps, so she adopted that baby. And a few years later, she convinced young pregnant woman not to have abortion, not to kill baby, and promised that she will take baby and they never will see each other again, which she really did. That lady delivered baby. Pani Alexandra Jevetsky took that baby and adopted him. So in 57, with last boy remaining with her, she moved to Poland. We were exchanging some letters.
Can I just ask you, may I ask you why she moved to Poland?
Before moving to Poland, maybe a few years before, she continued to have two boys she adopted. Suddenly, mother of boy we found on her steps
Of the first
showed
child.
up, or first child. She was a woman of bad behavior, but probably making prostitute, yes, probably making good money. And she convinced that young boy, he was maybe 10 years old at that time, that with mother he will have much better life. And boy escaped. And Pani Alexandra Jevetsky was left with last one boy, Janek, or Jan in English. And Pani Alexandra worries that maybe similar situation may happen.
Oh, that the child might be taken
one,
away from her.
in one way or another, legally, or he will escape. So she decided to move to Poland, where she had distant relatives, just to save this last one child. So in 1957, she moved to Poland, but being very, very poor, the only income she had in Soviet Union, it was government pension she was awarded for saving life of that Russian major, which at that time it was 60 rubles, but Russian government doesn't increase pension because of inflation.
What is 60 rubles equivalent, or what was it?
At that time, in late 40s, it was pretty good money. In early 50s, you could survive. Now, probably it will be weekly pay. It's nothing.
So she was struggling then.
Yeah, absolutely. And when she went to Poland, that money was converted into Polish currency, and at that time it was 15 zlot per ruble. So she was getting 900 zlot for both of them. She couldn't support child with such low income. She gave him for adoption to another family. She hopes that that family really will take care of boy and give him education and so on.
It was very noble for her, after running away, to keep the child, to give him up for a better life.
Yes, yes. But it didn't happen. She saw that family which adopted wanted just to use him as actually free labor. And as far as I know, she sued that family and got child back.
Oh, she got the child back.
Yes, and later on, I think he went for military. But knowing that she is in Poland in 1967, when I first time visited my uncle, we made trip across entire Poland. We found her in very, very poor financial condition. Her health was okay. She was over 80 years old, probably 82, 83. I don't know exactly of her age. But amazing was her memory. In the beginning, at first moment, she did not recognize me, but when my uncle said, "This is Stas from Vilna," she immediately recognized me. And just by looking on her face, you could read all her feelings deep inside and her thoughts. First, she wanted to cry from happiness, and immediately thought, if I will cry, it will ruin our meeting. She somehow held herself without crying. She smiled, kissed me, and we began to talk. Her memory was amazing. She remembered everything, almost, it seems to me, every day of our life. And at that time, I told her a story about the way I remember that basement. I thought it could be dream. She said, no, it's exactly the way it looked like. And I told her another story, asking, was it dream or was it real in reality? And stories such as I was awakened, or as everyone in our basement, by knock into the door. It was middle of the night, curfew, so someone illegally got into our apartment. And when Pani Alexandra opened the door with candle, I just saw men in some kind of uniform or it was remaining of military uniform, giving something to Pani Alexandra, and he immediately left. And Pani Alexandra brought to me small cake, maybe inch wide, inch tall, and maybe 2 inches long. Strangely enough, immediately after war, they were selling similar cakes in Russian stores. And because I saw them later on in Russian stores, I thought that maybe it was dream. But at our meeting, Pani Alexandra told me that it really happened. At that night, resistance fighters from forest had raid on German food warehouses.
Oh, they had a raid on the
Warehouses.
warehouses that belonged
Yes.
to the Germans.
Yes, and they picked up as part of food supply those cakes. So my father, on their way back to forest, stepped by and left one piece of cake for
For
myself.
you. Look at that image that you carried, that you remembered from 1944 to 1967.
Yes,
all
but
those years.
until I met her,
You
I
didn't
wasn't
know.
sure it was reality or it was
Oh, that's
dream.
amazing.
So a lot of things I found out at our meeting. And I was amazed to see that she kept moving out of Soviet Union and moving in Poland from one place to another. She kept that birth certificate. And she kept that article in her own private archive.
Oh, and that's when she gave you
Yes,
both items.
probably she understood that it would be our last meeting and there wasn't any sense for her to keep it any longer because it will be just totally lost. So she gave me as a reminder of her good deeds to me, or actually, she didn't mean anything, she just gave me, but for me it's really a reminder of her.
It's a very special remembrance.
Of course.
Was that meeting quite emotional, I presume?
Yes, we couldn't get back to our normal life for months. It was very emotional feeling for both of myself, my wife, and actually my uncle was there. Later on, my uncle tried to help her financially, but she passed away 1 year later.
All right, now we're back in 1944, and your father is coming to get you. It's the end of the war for Russia and Poland and Lithuania. So he picks you up from... Oh, here's a picture of your father here.
Yes, this picture was taken immediately after liberation of city. He is in a semi-military uniform. As you know, foreign forest resistance
the
fighters,
resistance, the
they were
partisans.
wearing whatever they could get hold of. And this is a Russian-made machine gun. Picture was taken immediately after liberation of city. So he knew where I was, and he did not continue fighting. He was released from partisans, and he stayed in Vilna. So he immediately wanted to pick me up, and of course, as far as I understand, he called me the name
Gregory.
Original name they chose with my mother. And being called for 4 years Stanislavas, of course, I didn't respond to Greg. And somehow my father decided, maybe from a respect to Pani Alexander Zhivetsky or for whatever another reason, he decided to leave that name. And since then, in home of my father, I was Stanislav. And among all my friends in school, in kindergarten, even I entered school as Gregory. Among all friends, I was called as Stanislav. And even my wife today calls me Stanislav.
I see. So when your father picked you up, you resumed a normal family life with your father?
Well, as normal as it could be for any Jewish family in 1944 in Soviet Union.
How soon after that did your father remarry?
Maybe a few years later. I don't recall exactly. Maybe 47, maybe 48. But his second child, or my brother, was born in 49. So probably somewhere at 47.
So you had a brother that was good for you, and you had a stepmother who took care of you.
In some way, yes.
Some ways. We have a picture of you with your uncle. Maybe you'll tell us when that was taken and how old you are.
I don't know exactly, was I 8 years old, 10 years old. I think that this picture was taken before my uncle left for Poland, because during war he was in Soviet Union. In 1939, my uncle David and
This is how. Oh, this is your mother's brother.
this is my mother's brother, Uncle David. In 1939, he was as political prisoner in Polish jail, at the same jail where my father was, the same as political prisoner. And as soon World War II broke down, all political prisoners were released from jails. Somehow, even without knowing what direction to take, they moved so-called to the left, and they met Russian army instead of going to the right and meeting German army.
Oh, that was fortunate, wasn't it?
It was fortunate for them. So he went to Soviet Union, and during World War II, he was in Soviet Union. I don't recall name where somewhere in mid-Asia there was place where all Polish people were kept until their fate was decided, and many people read in papers that Russian government was organizing Polish army, and as my uncle found out about Polish army, he sent application to Moscow, describing his past, his involvement in underground activities against all Polish government. He was called to Moscow, and in Moscow they decided that they can find much better use for him, and at that time they didn't care that he was Jewish. And immediately after, a Russian army went to Poland, and Poland was liberated from German. As far as I understand, the Russian government organized group of people to send to Poland to organize new communist Polish government. And as soon Polish communist government was established in Poland, Russian government began to sell them experienced people. And my uncle was experienced in economics, so he was sent to Poland. And before leaving Soviet Union for good, he visited us, and I think that this picture
was
taken at that time. And this picture, as you know, opens up book which was published, written by my uncle in Poland. It was published before 40th anniversary of Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It was published in Warsaw.
Has that book ever been translated?
Into English?
Into English or Hebrew?
I don't think so. I know that it was distributed all over the world because this is story of his life, story of people he met, and all people all over the world, in Israel, in Brazil, in Argentina, people who came from the same village he came or who fought together with him were interested to obtain this book. So I know that it's all over the world.
We don't have too much time left, but I'd like to ask you, Gregory, do you know what happened? Do you know whether this woman who saved your life was ever made a righteous Gentile at Yad Vashem?
I don't know for sure. I hope she was. And the reason I hope, the baby Gitella I told you about, her parents found her immediately after war, and they got to Palestine immediately after. And in 1967, when I visited Poland and I met with Pani Alexandra Żywiecki, she told me, Pani Alexandra, that she is in constant communication with Gitella's family, not just with her parents, already with grown women. And she showed me Gitella's picture. Gitella at that time had 2 children. So I hope that Gitella, having much better access, has done it.
made her righteous Gentile.
I hope so.
Which means that you haven't been to Israel, so
No, I haven't
you
been
don't
yet.
know. But when you do go, you can
Yes.
find it.
Yes, I will find out, and if it's not, I will do it definitely.
In conclusion, do you have a message that you'd like to give as far as the Holocaust is concerned and what happened to you and to other people?
My personal experience, as you saw, it's very unique experience. And when we are talking especially about interrelation between religion, Jews versus Christians, and what happened during the war in Poland, of course, my personal experience does not erase Auschwitz,
No.
does not erase lack of help to Warsaw Ghetto uprisal, but it shows that we cannot make everyone equal across the board as our enemies or people who wish us bad. Example of my fate and example of Pani Alexandra Żywiecki shows that there were hundreds and hundreds of decent Christian people who saved a lot of Jews.
Thank goodness for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.